student who got a perfect score from Kingram, and he expressed that testing the other students the same way as Luin is unfair. The dean acknowledges his point, but they don't have any other monster prepared. Professor Elric informed the dean that they have another one. He narrated that when the Foldrin Knights brought the orcs, they also brought one ogre. Professor Elric admitted that using an ogre on the trial is very dangerous, but he also said that with Professor Heidel in there, along with the knights. Professor Elric couldn't help his curiosity on what Luin is capable of. Moments later, in the hallway of the academy, Professor Heidel is waiting for Luin to pass by. Professor Heidel called him, and Luin acknowledged the presence of the professor. The professor has something to say to him before the trial. Professor Heidel gave him a heads-up that he will be tested harder than the others. The professor revealed to him that the academy is expecting a lot from him since he got a perfect score from Kingram. Because of that, some were saying that it's unfair for Luin to fight the same monster as the normal students, and that's why his trial will be harder than the others. Our MC asked the professor how it would be harder. The professor shared to him that he'll be fighting a different monster, not an orc. Professor Heidel revealed to him that he'll be fighting against an ogre. Luin and Strang were flabbergasted. Then Strang uttered how Luin's first real opponent is an ogre. He expressed that it looked like it would be fun. In another setting, a monster is trying to break free from the chains. It looked menacing, and it roared loudly. Jason asked his classmate if it's an orc captain. The student replied that it's an ogre. Upon hearing that, Jason got worried. A knight gripped his sword tightly while thinking that the only reason he brought it is because he was asked to. But in his opinion, an ogre shouldn't be used against students for test purposes. That made him wonder how strong the student is. An ogre looked similar to an orc, but it's much stronger than it. Ogres can crack a skull or twist a spine on a single swing. A knight asked Professor Heidel if he's sure about it, especially since the ogre is difficult to capture even with their help. Professor Heidel responded firmly that he's sure about it since it's the dean's orders. The knight, with a hint of aggression, commented how Professor Heidel puts his life on the line for the test in the academy. A person replied that he will put his life on the line. The knight asked this person who he was. He introduced himself as Luin Ardell, the student for the trial. The knight couldn't believe that it's the student who will go against the ogre. He believed that there's no way a student can go against that ogre. The knight was thinking how he and the professor will protect this student, but he was confused when Luin passed through him. That made him wonder where Luin was going. The knight told Luin that he's going the wrong way, and this knight asked Luin what he was doing. Luin replied that he's getting ready for the trial. The knight told him that he's in the wrong position because he should be at the back. Our MC informed that knight that it is where he will fight. The knight got confused. With a determined expression, Luin told the knight that his spells are quite different. The knight gets slightly annoyed as he informs Luin that they can't protect him if he's in front of them. He reminded Luin that the monster is not as easy as an orc. Luin replied that he knew about that. The knight had furrowed brows when he asked Luin why he was doing that with his life. Luin took off his jacket, and he replied to the knight, "I'm desperate." The knight observed Luin as Luin positioned himself. He admitted to himself that he couldn't sense any fear from Luin. That made him think that Luin is different. Professor Heidel instructed Luin to get ready. Then the professor announced the commencement of Luin's trial. The ogre was released from its chains, and it immediately charged towards the humans. The knights were positioned in front of Luin, and they had prepared their shields. But to their surprise, Luin charged ahead. The knight panicked. He tried to stop Luin. He wondered what Luin's plan was. The ogre let out a loud, terrifying noise as it lifted its arm. As a response to that, Luin leapt. And when he's close to the ogre, he releases a fireball. Their fists met at the center. People were surprised that Luin fought this monster head-on. The knight was astonished when Luin used a close combat spell in that situation. Professor Heidel tried to keep watch even if the flame and smoke made it difficult to see. The other students protected their eyes as well. Even Professor Elric and the dean were surprised. The smoke blocked the vision of everyone. The knight hoped that Luin wasn't dead. When the smoke cleared, he saw Luin's figure. He was shocked to see that Luin is still alive. He wondered how Luin was still standing. Meanwhile, Professor Heidel is grinning. I bet he had already expected this to happen. The knight taps Luin's shoulder. He scolded Lewin because Lewin should have informed him beforehand. He yelled, "You almost died there." Lewin apologized, but he asked if the knight would still allow him to do that if he informed him ahead of time. The knight was taken aback with that question. Lewin told him that they should finish the trial first. The ogre was angry and it looked terrifying. The knight asked Lewin to step back for now since it's dangerous. He instructed Lewin to sit still until he finished taking care of the ogre. But Lewin stepped forward. He positioned himself in front of the knight. He declared to the knight that it was his trial. With a stern expression, he uttered, "Let me finish my trial." Lewin looked at the ogre that's 5 times bigger than him, and then he charged towards the ogre. There were 2 reasons why he felt brave, one of which is because of his skill, the ogre's friend. It's the title that he got from Kingram that lets him talk to ogres. He understood what the ogre was screaming about. Earlier, it told him not to come near him, and it demanded to be released. The ogre looked like a furious monster to normal people, but not to Lewin. He understood that the ogre was scared of being surrounded by a bunch of magicians and knights. Second reason is that Lewin got a sudden request. It was an urgent quest to fight an enemy that he can't avoid. Lewin was tasked to subdue the enemy faster than others. There were 2 objectives. First is to strike the enemy first. The second objective is to defeat the enemy. The reward for this is +30 strength and a skill called Player's Eye. It was a great reward for someone like Lewin, who had to repeat the same quest every day. It was 3 days' worth of strength in one quest. That's when he took off, since he had no reason to hesitate. His fist met the ogre's. His flame engulfed the arm of the ogre. It was a huge flame. With that, Lewin had completed the first objective. But it's not over yet. The ogre told him that he would kill him. The ogre jumped really high. They anticipated the impact of the attack. The ogre screamed that it would crush Lewin's head. Fortunately, Lewin was able to evade on time. He decided to look for its weak point. Lewin used time refraction. The knight was surprised. He wondered how Lewin is so fast. Lewin wanted to get close to the ogre. He charged ahead and aimed at the ogre's weak point. The knight was astonished at how Lewin is not hesitating in facing off the ogre. The students wondered what was happening. Then they saw that the ogre had fought back. It raised its fist against Lewin, who also did the same thing. Lewin also hit the ogre's arm using his knee. The ogre got a hold of Lewin, and it threw Lewin in the air. Lewin had adjusted his body and was able to control how he would land, but he was taken aback. The ogre suddenly threw a powerful punch. Fortunately, he was quick to evade it. The ogre was so furious that it called Lewin a rat. Lewin leapt up high. While in the air, he positioned his legs, and he kicked the ogre. It was powerful enough to make the ogre fall to the ground with a loud impact. Lewin landed and stepped on its chest. He decided to end the fight soon. He used the skill Ogre's Fur to increase his strength for 30 seconds. The ogre asked him if he's even a human, and when Lewin uttered, "You didn't expect me to answer, right?" the ogre was in total shock. Just to confirm, the ogre asked Lewin if he can really understand what he's saying. In return, Lewin confirmed if it can understand him too. That made the ogre angrier, but Lewin did not even let it have time to do it because he used Explosion Mana Burn right on its chest, and the ogre's fury effect was stacked. The system informed Lewin of the change to Berserk status. It caused a massive explosion. By the time Lewin's flame dissipates, the ogre had already been knocked out. Our MC slowly stood up and wondered if his attack had sealed the deal. Strang, on the other hand, commented that Lewin is better than he expected. While looking at Lewin, the students couldn't believe their eyes. Then they cheered and praised Lewin. Professor Elric was flabbergasted that Lewin actually won, while the dean is delighted. The knights checked out the ogre's body. They couldn't believe that it was possible for Lewin to defeat the ogre all by himself. The knight that scolded Lewin earlier asked on from whom did he learn the spell and physical skill. Lewin replied that there's no one who taught him. The knight was suspicious that Lewin learned that by himself, but Lewin was firm on what he said. Then Lewin asked Professor Heidel to announce the result of his trial. The professor was silent for quite some time. Then he shared that he honestly thought Lewin wouldn't be able to do it, but Lewin didn't even give him a chance to stop him. He told Lewin that Lewin exceeded his expectations, and the professor announced that he passed. Everybody cheered for Lewin. Lewin had a great smile on his face. The blue window displayed that the quest was completed, and Lewin received the reward. Lewin was a bit overwhelmed with what he got. The player's eye gives him the ability to see through the nature of everything, and with it, he can sense stealth and track invisibility. Strang looked proud, and he commented how Lewin is starting to become a real player. Lewin asked him if he knew that skill. Strang informed him that it's something that only a player can have. He explained that enemies hiding using stealth or invisibility magic will look different in Lewin's eyes. He will be able to perceive them with a faint outline. Lewin commented how it's pretty useful, and then the blue window displayed that mini-map has been unlocked. With it, he can see everything within a 500-meter radius around him. Because of that, he can view the status window of the desired target and information. It's pretty useful. And then the blue window displayed that mini-map has been unlocked. With it, he can see everything within a 500-meter radius around him. Because of it, he can view the status window of the desired target, and information that is available to be viewed depends on the target's level. Strang looked happy with it and told our MC that there are more surprises. Strang instructed Lewin to look at the fallen ogre and activate the player's eye. Lewin did as he was told. He was surprised when the blue window appeared. He saw the target's condition, which states that the ogre in front of him is a shoulder blade ogre with 3 stars. Lewin was impressed with his new skill. He decided to try it out on Professor Heidel. It displayed that the professor is a 6th-class magician, and other information is not yet accessible to Lewin. He told Strang how the information was limited. Strang explained that it's because he can't get information about people who are on a higher level than him. Strang told him that as he gets stronger, the information available to view will increase. That made Lewin smirk. After the real combat test had ended, rumors spread throughout the academy about Lewin defeating the ogre. Jason asked him how he felt about everyone talking about him. He replied that it's new to him, so he doesn't know how to feel about it. All of a sudden, a woman approached him. This gentle-looking woman asked if he's Lewin. Then several other women appeared. They expressed how awesome Lewin is, and they gave him gifts. When they stepped away from Lewin, they all squealed. Lewin asked Jason if he wanted the snacks. Jason was utterly surprised. Jason scolded Lewin and told him that the act is disrespectful to the lady who overcame her embarrassment and packed lunch for him. Lewin asked him why he was the one getting worked up. While looking at the puppy jealousy face of Jason, a blue window displayed that Jason Damon is a 2nd-class magician with a high potential. For the past few days, Lewin had been checking out everyone's status, and only Jason showed high potential. In a serious tone, Lewin told his friend to try a little bit harder, and he'll do great on the next test. Jason was confused by the random sympathy from Lewin. Lewin explained that he's not sympathizing with him. He told Jason that he's just saying that he had a high potential. He also encouraged Jason by saying that Jason's skills are great, so he should regain his confidence and work harder. Jason replied, "Really?" Lewin answered yes and advised him to not just play. That motivated Jason to be in the top 10. Funnily and honestly, Lewin replied that it's a difficult goal. Jason asked Lewin if he's being real because sometimes he couldn't just believe him. Lewin asked him what he meant. Jason explained that he's wondering if he's the same Lewin that he had known and was close to for the past 6 years. In his head, Lewin admitted that sometimes he couldn't believe it too, so he understood Jason on that part. Jason also told him that there had been rumors around Lewin, and the rumors state that Lewin will be able to push past against Michael Garyhill and become not only the Valedictorian, but also the representative of the Academy. Lewin replied that he doesn't care about that, and he invited Jason to head inside. Jason couldn't believe that he doesn't care when it's the year of the Grand Festival. In the 5th month of every year, representatives from famous academies come together and a Magic Festival is held to decide who is superior amongst themselves. And once every 8 years, the Olympiad gathers all the magicians to determine the greatest magician. When the 2 events overlap, it is called the Grand Festival. The Grand Festival is a national competition for the brightest students from the most famed academies. The winner of the Grand Festival and their academy not only receives a large sum of money, but they also can receive various privileges. That's why there is a limit to how many students can compete. 1 student for individual competitions and 30 students for group competitions. A total of the 31 best students in the academy can compete. And the one who competes during the individual competition becomes the Academy's representative. Inside the cafeteria, students started to wonder who would become the representative for that year. One student wondered if it would be Michael again. Jason replied that it will be Lewin. Another student seconded the motion since Lewin is the only student who received 100 points from Kingram. And Jason reminded everyone about Michael's performance during the times that he attended the festival. Students recalled that Michael flunked the group competition and placed 4th of 5 during the individual competition. And that is why their academy had been labeled as Last Academy, which meant that it's the last place academy where the students can't even compete individually or as a team. One student mentioned that the only way for them to escape the nickname is with Lewin. They asked Lewin what he thought about it. Lewin replied that the test isn't over yet. He knew that it's too early to be confident and excited. In the end, the one who participates during the Grand Festival is based on the first semester test scores and recommendations from the professors. And the 4th test, the 1v1 with Mikkel, is still coming up. And that's why Lewin needed to focus on the next test. After all he can think about is beating up Michael. 4 days after the 3rd test, the real combat test, Lewin continued his hellish training and has finally attained 1,000 strength. He had obtained the title, Preparations Are Over. Strang was excited. He had obtained the title, Preparations Are Over. Strang was excited since he waited for this day to come. He asked Lewin if he's ready to start leveling up now. The blue window displayed that repeatable quest has been upgraded to level 2. Strang leapt and positioned himself on Lewin's shoulder. The window informed Lewin that the difficulty of the repeatable quest doubles, while the reward triples. Strang was just like Kirby at this point. He's sucking everything. Then he gulped down Lewin's powers, and he exudes a powerful aura around him. The flame was so powerful that it lightened up the whole area. Lewin wondered what that flame was. And then he recognized something. Meanwhile, Professor Elric was in deep thoughts. He recalled how Lewin ended the ogre, and Professor Elric realized that he actually ended up helping that guy. He wondered if Lewin Ardell could now face Mikkel and be able to win. But he assumed that the victory was unlikely. If that happens, it could jeopardize Mikkel's place at the Grand Festival and even weaken his position as Valedictorian. He wanted the Garyhill family to be at the top of the academy no matter what. Back to Lewin and Strang. The incarnation of strength, Strang has advanced to rank 2, and Lewin received Plow 200 strength. Lewin noticed that Strang had grown a lot. He asked what happened since it's also thanks to Strang that Lewin's strength reached 1200 quickly. Strang stood with pride and a smiling face. Strang confidently announced that it was just the start. He also guessed that the difficulty and rewards had increased. They both checked the status window. It states, the repeatable quest is at level 2. This means that Lewin had matured to a basic level of body strength required for battle. However, his training continues. Now his goal is to reach 5,000 punch, kick, spin kick, and 15-kilometer run, plus 1 real battle training. Completing this would give him a reward of plus 30 strength. Lewin uttered that he had already been doing the increased amount of training, so it wouldn't be too difficult. But he inquired to Strang about the real combat training. Strang replied that he is capable of becoming anything. Lewin remembered that Strang told him that. So Strang explained that from now on, he can transform into anything, but there's a limit. Lewin asked if Strang could transform into human form. Strang replied that he could do it when he reached rank 5. However, transforming into a human perfectly is going to be difficult. So Lewin asked what he could transform into. That made Strang smile and asked if he wanted to see. There was a gush of wind around Strang. He became a tornado, and it grew bigger as he completed the transformation. When it was complete, it revealed a terrifying scarecrow. Strang asked why Lewin's reaction was like that. Lewin replied that it was because what he had seen was something different from what he expected. Strang told him not to look down on scarecrows. He asked if Lewin had any idea on how helpful Strang is when he first started to do real training with Draca. Lewin asked if Strang is the dummy during that real training. Strang replied yes, and to be exact, he's the buddy for Lewin's quest. So Lewin asked to clarify if it meant that he will be doing real combat training with Strang every day. Strang replied yes. Strang replied that since he's weak, he's only at the level of a third-class magician. But with a devilish look, Strang announced that when he regains his strength again, anything is possible. If Lewin would desire, Strang could even be a demon or a dragon. Lewin decided to start training. Strang asked him what he would like him to turn into. Lewin replied that he should be a magician. That triggered a dark, devilish, yet excited look from the bear. This summoned pet gathered its power towards its paw. Strang brought out his staff. He informed Lewin that if his magic hits Lewin, it will only cause a knockback and cannot inflict damage. Lewin asked what it is like for Strang. Strang announced that he will not take any damage. Now Lewin sees Strang as the perfect training partner. Then Strang made the first attack. It was a powerful fireball, but Lewin was able to evade immediately. While evading, Lewin thought of Mikkel. That Mikkel could also be training like him, and that made Lewin excited for the day of the test. On the other hand, Mikkel called his uncle. He admitted that the son of a bitch is making him mad. So, he asked for his uncle's advice on what he should do about it. His loser uncle scolded him and told him that he was just a bit stronger. But Mikkel told his uncle that he has no right to be talking that way right now, since there are rumors around him, that he's the one who raised Lewin's grades up. It was because it's his uncle's idea to make Lewin face against an ogre. Mikkel was mad. He blamed his uncle for making Lewin get the best score. He informed his uncle that if their family found out about it, he's sure that things won't look for him. This made Professor Elric furious, since it felt like Mikkel blackmailed him. So Mikkel told him to stop spewing nonsense and just think of a way to fix the situation. Mikkel was worried that Lewin could become the Academy's representative at the Grand Festival. Professor Elric expressed that it was unacceptable. Professor Elric gave him a bottle. Mikkel was surprised to see the Herb of Awakening, the burning flower. The Herb of Awakening burning flower grows in the northern lands of hallucination. It is a rare and precious medicinal herb, and some people use it to create special elixirs. Professor Elric told Mikkel that if he drinks that, it will cause an awakening effect, and it can drastically reduce mana casting times. But Mikkel knew that the side effect is to make the person forget about pain and make it hard to distinguish friend and foe. Professor Elric told him he's correct. Basically, the drink will make him unable to see anything. He commented how Mikkel is paying attention to his classes since he knew about it. Mikkel clarified if the professor wanted him to drink it. Professor Elric replied yes. Michael's initial reaction was to ask if his uncle is crazy. Professor Elric asked him if he should be complaining when he lost to that guy and he would eventually be kicked out of the family for bringing shame. Mikkel was nervous because it was risky. He's aware that Professor Heidel knew his exact limit, and if that professor notices any changes, he'll catch on. His uncle reminded him that he's in charge of the drug testing, so he gave Mikkel another vial, and that contains a potion that will conceal the fact that he took the herb. He instructed Mikkel to drink the purple vial after using the burning flower. He told Mikkel not to be afraid because they are Gary Hills, and it's their way of getting ahead. Professor Elric asked Mikkel if he's going to do it or not. Mikkel doesn't look pleased. Finally, the day of the 1v1 combat test had arrived. The location of the test is the Mana Barrier Hall. Every year during the 1v1 combat test, the entire test site becomes packed, and the last fight had begun. It was between Mikkel and Lewin. Lewin walked to the center. It's the day that he had been waiting for. The face, off against Mikkel. Strang told him that the opponent knows that Lewin will probably engage in close combat, and if that opponent had prepared for that, it will become difficult for Lewin. It was funny how both of them had their sinister smiles when Lewin asked what if he approached the guy, and Strang replied, "Yeah, just one punch is needed." The instructor informed that for the test to be as close to a real combat as possible, there were various geographical features placed. The instructor asked if they were ready. They replied yes. Lewin noticed something. He looked at Mikkel and figured out that Mikkel's condition isn't normal. Mikkel was breathing heavily as if he's in rage. Lewin also observed that Mikkel is not as arrogant as usual, which made him think that something is off. He decided to check using the player's eye. It activated, and the status window says that Michael Garyhill is a third-class magician with high potential and double casting feature. There's also the special condition called Berserk, hidden. It's the first time that Lewin encountered Berserk. And on top of that, it says hidden. It made him wonder if Mikkel took something to hide his use of drugs. Before the test, there was a drug test, but Lewin realized that the professor in charge of the testing was Professor Elric. So, he thought of the possibility that Michael's uncle, Professor Elric, made Michael take something and helped him get away with it. The instructor told them that the only magic banned in the spar is the black magic. All magic based on the 4 elements are allowed, and the instructors consider the level of magic that hits the opponent to measure the score. The instructor advised them not to worry about the opponent since, inside the mana barrier hall, the effectiveness of magic is reduced by 99%. The instructor asked if they had any questions. Lewin had one, so the instructor allowed him to speak. Then Lewin asked what would happen if someone is found to have taken an illegal potion. Mikkel was surprised to hear that. The instructor explained that if that happens, the student will forfeit their right to take the test and will be considered failed. Also, depending on the severity, an examination to determine expulsion could also proceed. The instructor asked Lewin why he asked that. Lewin didn't say anything, but he gave Mikkel a knowing look. The students were instructed to get into their positions. Lewin knew that what he had right now was just an assumption. Since he's the only one who can see it through his status window, nobody would believe him. He needed to find solid evidence. They were both in position, and the instructor announced, "Begin!" These two didn't waste any second, and they immediately charged at each other. Mikkel made a powerful green orb of magic while yelling for Lewin to die, and it caused vines to wrap on Lewin's leg. But it was easy for Lewin to slice it up. The students were surprised that he did that easily. They wondered if Mikkel's spell did not work on him. It was great for Lewin since the mana barrier hall reduced the strength of magic, but not his own strength. He ran towards Mikkel. Mikkel summoned a skull that breathed flame, and he attacked Lewin with fire breath. It was followed by haste, which Lewin skillfully dodged. Lewin kept running, and fortunately, he was able to hide behind a boulder when the flame engulfed the area. While hiding behind that boulder, he tried to observe Mikkel. He figured out that reduced casting times and increased mana collection are the effects of Mikkel's potion. Mikkel taunted him to come out. Lewin also noticed that Mikkel is more worked up than usual, and from those data, he was able to determine what Mikkel had intake. He figured out that it was the herb of awakening, burning flower. He also noticed Mikkel's shaky hands, excessive excitement, suppression of pain receptors, and lowered ability to distinguish between a friend and foe. So, it all adds up. Mikkel continued to lure him out. Lewin knew that the only thing left was pain suppression. Our MC came out and told Mikkel that it was no wonder that Mikkel is so confident. It's because of that. Mikkel asked what he meant. Lewin uttered, "Burning flower." Mikkel was taken aback. Lewin told him that it doesn't matter because he himself wouldn't be needing something like that, just to defeat Mikkel. He informed Mikkel that he's coming for him. Lewin used time refraction. Mikkel struggled because Lewin was too fast. This loser tried to block Lewin's way by placing an ice wall, but it was no use. Lewin shattered the ice wall with his powerful kick. The professors were surprised. The students wondered if that was even magic. They couldn't believe that Lewin rushed into Mikkel in just one go, but Mikkel fought back. He summoned a gigantic salamander that breathed fire. This attack is a third-class magic, and it was a fire lizard. To counter that, Lewin clenched his fist and used earthquake. He punched the ground and it shattered. It created a hole, deep enough for the fire lizard to fall into. The students were amused with how Lewin countered the fire element using the earth element. Mikkel lost balance. He fell on his butt and screamed when Lewin loomed over him. Lewin prepared his finger while telling Mikkel not to be a pussy and take it. Mikkel was confused and he stared at the finger, but that finger was packed with enormous power. A few seconds later, the whole stadium shook as a loud kaboom was heard all over the place. That deafening sound came from our MC's last attack, a forehead fucking flick. All of the students that were present inside the stadium had their mouths wide open in shock. Dust around the area has now started to settle. Lewin noticed something in front of him, and that was Mikkel, who was still conscious even after receiving the attack. This loser also claimed that Lewin was looking down on him. He was about to whine about that forehead flick, but Lewin had already followed the attack with a powerful punch. He continued to perform a barrage of punches while pushing Mikkel back, and after a few more hits, Mikkel was finally down again. But even then, he was still conscious. His body was already trembling from the damage he received, but Mikkel still managed to laugh. He even boasted and claimed that Lewin's punches were too soft. Our MC knew that it was dangerous to let things like this so he tapped Mikkel's shoulders and casted a spell called Binding Tree. Green vines appeared and held Mikkel in his place. Lewin then raised his hand to get the attention of the professors. He then told them Mikkel used a forbidden drug. The battle was stopped, and a professor approached Lewin. He was asked if he was sure because if he was just lying, he would be disqualified. Lewin was confident and told them that he was sure because one can make a drug that can't be detected in tests any time. He even added that someone could even turn a blind eye to it. The professor then knew what Lewin was talking about. Our MC commented that someone who could handle multiple rare materials to his heart's content and conduct the test before the match would be the culprit. Both of them turned their gazes to Professor Elric, and that made him wary. Lewin's statement made the students realize that he has a point because Professor Elric was Mikkel's uncle, and upon hearing that, Professor Elric disappeared from his seat. He came down and approached Lewin. Professor Elric wanted to deny what our MC had said. He couldn't believe that a student would really think that he would give his nephew some drugs and then turn a blind eye to it. But then, Lewin just smiled and told everyone that he even has proof. Professor Elric panicked for a bit and then suggested that they should just conduct another drug test. But Lewin told him that there's no need for that, especially when they have already used special elixir to hide the symptoms. This loser was already becoming more edgy. He asked Lewin what he wanted to propose. Lewin approached a huge trunk of a tree and told everyone that he'll show Professor Elric directly what he meant. Gigachad Lewin made an attack and it blasted the entire trunk of the tree, and it was just by using his fingers. He then revealed that the attack that everyone just saw was the same finger flick that he did on Mikkel earlier. This revelation made Professor Elric's body tremble. Lewin added that even if Mikkel's magic was higher than normal due to practice, that loser kept on laughing and being awake after being hit with that attack. In his current condition, his skull would be wobbling, and at least 4 ribs would have been broken. But even then, he's still laughing. It was as if he couldn't feel any pain. Lewin asked this professor again if he still wanted to deny it, but Elric just kept his silence, and that only meant one thing. The dean then finally made his move and called out Professor Elric's name in front of everyone. The old man was oozing with anger and disappointment. He couldn't believe that a professor would dare to commit such a thing in this sacred testing ground. The dean addressed Elric and commanded him to follow the old man in his office. This loser knew he fucked up. Big time. Meanwhile, Lewin just watched Professor Elric exit the place, and even after all that happened, Mikkel was still laughing and high. After that, the 4th test passed like a storm. The hallways of the academy were filled with news that Professor Elric was fired and Mikkel was expelled. The corruption of the Gary Hill family was also laid out in the open. Our MC also gained a new nickname, which was Expulsion Maker. We then see Lewin standing in front of this huge-ass door. His body started to be enveloped by light, and that was because he was summoned by the dean. In his mind, he didn't know what to expect, and after a few seconds he was finally transported to another place. His eyes widened as he realized where he was. In front of him was a familiar place. It was none other than the Ardell territory. A luxurious red chair was also placed right in the middle of the fields. Lewin came to his senses that it was not his home because it's a bit different. As he looked around intently, he finally noticed something. The red chair is the throne of Teron, where the king of magicians sits. He then wondered what it was doing there. His thoughts were interrupted when the dean appeared and asked him what he saw. While following the old man, Lewin found out that this place was created independently by the Eye of Malarok. Our MC had heard about it. Malarok is the name of the leader of the demons that first invaded the Frelia continent. They say that he had the power to force a target to have visions of what they desired the most, but after the demise of this demon, his body parts were produced into artifacts. The dean told Lewin that the Eye of Malarok showed him the world he wanted to see. In short, it was like the infinite Tsukuyomi of Madara. Lewin then realized why he saw his family's territory and the chair of the king, and that was because he wanted to revive their glory and become the best magician. The dean also asked Lewin if he's not curious about what the dean sees inside this place. Our MC then inquired about it. With a relaxed expression, the old man revealed that he sees a world where students act like students and magicians act like magicians. Of course, that world won't be easy to achieve. And Lewin agreed to that. They now stood in front of another door. The huge door opened. But before going in, Lewin looked back once again. That's when he saw himself holding a trophy and was being cheered on by some students around him. Lewin also saw one instance where he graduated as the Valedictorian of the Academy. These images gave him enough reason to smile. A few moments later, the two were now inside the dean's office. The old man offered our MC 1 cup of tea. Lewin thanked him for the kind gesture, and while sipping the tea, the dean just stared at him intently. The dean revealed the reason why Lewin was called here today. And that was for the dean to ask one question. With a curious look on his face, the dean inquired how Lewin was able to detect that Mikkel used the burning flower and other stimulants. Lewin became silent for a moment. He then answered that Mikkel's aura was quite different from the usual. He thought of the burning flower because Mikkel looked aggressive yet anxious. There's also an abnormal flow and amplification of his mana. The dean probed more why Lewin was more sure than suspicious. Our MC added that in his fight against Mikkel, he used physical strength and not magic. And that gave him the advantage because the barrier hole only controls magic and not strength. This was his alibi. Lewin thought that he didn't need to reveal that he had the player's eye. He continued by saying that even after all the damage Mikkel received, he still laughed. And that can only be explained by his use of the burning flower. The dean was already analyzing Lewin. He thought that this student was just 16, and yet possesses keen eyes to figure out changes like that against an opponent. He also noted his calm way of responding to situations. He then apologized because of the incident. The dean made sure that the Garyhill family will not be able to harm Lewin in any way. The old man also added that he has an offer to Lewin. He asked if he would join the Grand Festival in the 7th month this year as the Academy's representative, which shocked Lewin. He thought that the representative of the Grand Festival is a position that all students envy. That would also explain why he was personally called in the dean's office. Lewin closed his eyes while thinking what to say. He thanked the dean for the offer, but he mentioned that there's one problem, and that's experience. He revealed that he never had real battle experience for the last 5 years. Due to his Manhwa Evocation Disorder, he had an uneventful 5 years in the Academy. He also doesn't know if he could compete against the geniuses that would appear in the Grand Festival. But his worries were shoved off as the dean told him that it won't be a problem at all. The dean claimed and assured him that Lewin is worthy of being called a winning candidate. On top of that, the dean told him one more scary thing about Lewin. The old man considered him as a secret weapon that appeared out of nowhere. Lewin didn't expect this and blushed. The dean added that to the other participants, Lewin would be a dark horse. Information about him doesn't exist, and they won't be familiar with the methods that could counter the magic that he uses. Lewin is becoming more thrilled. Their academy always placed last in the previous tournaments, and no one would even keep an eye on them. That means they'll be more easy to catch off guard. Our MC clenched his fist as the dean asked him again if he's interested in participating, and with great enthusiasm he exclaimed that he shall try his best as much as the dean trusted him. Our boy has finally received recognition and would even compete with geniuses. At the perfect timing, someone knocked at the door. When the person entered, the dean informed Lewin that what will be helpful to him is a body arts class, rather than a magic class. So, the dean invited a professor to help him with his body arts. Lewin recognized that man, especially when this person greeted him and called him a desperate student. The knight asked him, "What's with his face?" and he confirmed if Lewin doesn't want to see him. It was Gulter Pirante. He is the Knight Order leader of the Foldren territory. He is one of the only 5 6th-rank knights that exist in the Radiant Kingdom, and it's the same person that Lewin worked with during the 3rd exam. He never expected that he would be receiving body arts class from him. Before they start, the knight told him that there are some things that he must confirm. Sir Gulter heard from Professor Heidel that Lewin is a special magician who has no choice but to fight at close range. He asked if that is true. Lewin answered that he's correct. Sir Gulter expressed that, from what he saw last time, Lewin's movement is quite good. It was concise and devoid of unnecessary movement. But he told Lewin that it was obvious that he didn't learn martial arts. Sir Gulter told him that his movements before have worked on ogres, but a skilled knight would have read them through. And no matter how strong he is, opponents who use body arts can figure out Lewin's attacks just by looking at his shoulder and hip movements. In his head, Lewin knew that Sir Gulter was right because the movements Lewin had learned were only repeated motions for the quest, so what can be used in practice is very limited. Sir Gulter told him not to worry too much because if he learned from him, Lewin's movements would change from the basics. Then he asked Lewin if he's ready to begin the training right away. He told Lewin that the most important thing for a knight is their feet. It is because the feet gives strength to the sword and allows it to predict the enemy's movements. As such, Lewin will need to learn how to walk properly. Only by learning the correct walk can Lewin learn proper body arts. The heavenly martial arts is a martial art that knights commonly learn in the training center. Lewin took the training seriously. Sir Gulter informed him that excluding the sword techniques, the heavenly martial arts consisted of a total of 36 martial movements. Lewin was giving his all. He moved fast to punch and kick, and he did it over and over again. Sir Gulter looked proud. Earlier, Lewin asked him why he is teaching him martial arts when it had no benefits to him. On top of that, it requires Sir Gulter to come into the academy every day to work. Sir Gulter told him that it's his investment. Simply to say, he just met someone who seems like that person would become a great magician. So if he helped out the future magician, he saw that it was a worthwhile investment. Lewin was honored to have him as an instructor. Sir Gulter felt awkward with that. Also, he requested to be addressed as an older brother, since he's only in his 20s. Lewin trained hard, under the supervision of his older brother Gulter. While observing him, Gulter admitted in his head that Lewin is doing great and he has grit. When Lewin defeated the ogre, Gulter checked the corpse and he saw that the ogre's jaw broke. He described Lewin as a melee-type magician, stronger than ogres, and that caught his interest. Just like that, 3 weeks had passed. Lewin's skill in body arts have increased and it reached level 10. As a reward, the effects of the skill the Magician of Madness will be enhanced. In addition to that, he can also imbue every part of his body with magic. Lewin felt the level up in his body. He told Strang that the effects are incredible. Strang replied that it was thanks to that he had reached rank 3. A blue window displayed that Lewin's strength is at 2,130. Lewin felt that strength coursing through his body. Strang commented that Lewin is getting stronger at a quick pace. He narrated that Draca took 2,000 strength over a year and a half after they met each other. Lewin asked if he's right, that it's just a gap in perception of the time between human and a dragon. Someone called out to Lewin. He asked Jason on what's wrong. Jason asked if he had seen it. He asked what it was. Jason informed him that the list of participants for the Grand Festival has been posted. Lewin Ardell was announced in the first place. He can vividly recall the entrance ceremony where he represented the new students and stood on the podium. Because of this, he became the subject of jealousy and doubtful gazes. In response to their jealousy, he had been acting pathetic for the past 5 years. He could only watch from afar as Mikkel received all the congratulatory messages. But now it's different. He ran towards the announcement board. Lewin had such a big smile on his face. He was listed as the representative. Students who saw him there were pleased to see him. They rushed towards him to congratulate him. It took him a long time, but he became a representative of the academy again. Oh, and Jason made it on the list too. Professor Heidel expressed that he was surprised when Sir Gulter said that Lewin had mastered the heavenly martial arts. But Lewin being a 5th-class novice at 16, Professor Heidel couldn't help but admit that Lewin's genius talent scares him. He let Lewin know that he has faith that he will do well. Like that, preparations for the Grand Festival proceeded without a hitch. And just in time, they headed to Altain, where the Grand Festival was held. Students were talking about getting on the Mana train. Most of them haven't rode it before. A student narrated that there are only 2 transit points in the Radian Kingdom, but they say that the Rainak Imperial Federation has over 100 transit points. A student butts in that it was obvious because it was an empire, while they are in the smallest of the small nations. One student commented that those country bumpkins are making all the fuss over a Mana train. Jason heard that, and he asked what. The student told them to stop acting tacky and to be quiet. That made Jason furious. That bastard is Henkes, Mikkel's lackey who participated in the Magic Festival last year together with him. Henkes told them that if they thought Lewin would show some kind of miracle during the Grand Festival, they should just give up. He added that Lewin is full of himself just because he got good grades for the first semester. Another student chimed in and expressed that the representatives of each college are very much like ghosts, and they would have had a better chance of winning if Mikkel, who had fought against them, were chosen as a representative. Henkes made it known to everyone that he doesn't acknowledge Lewin as their representative, so they should just take good care of things for themselves. Jason tries to hold back his anger. Lewin understood that there are a lot of bastards who want to benefit even just a little bit by latching themselves to the Gary Hill family, but he also knew that they have to do well in the competition with those guys. He told them that Mikkel must be delighted, because the dogs are still loyal to him even when Mikkel, the owner, is about to be kicked out. Henkes got triggered upon being called a dog. Lewin replied that it was such a relief that his clear message was understood with the kind of intelligence level that Henkes had. Henkes had a lot more things to say, but Lewin cut him mid-sentence and told him to listen up. He informed Henkes and the other lackeys that the Grand Festival will be on a different level with the last Magic Festivals they have experienced, and if they get a good result, they will receive better opportunities that they won't get from that Gary Hill family. Henkes argued that it will only work if they have good results, but he doubted if that's possible. He described the competitors as monsters, and in the end their fate is to be stuck in the Radiant Kingdom and work under the Gary Hill. Henkes was about to say to Lewin that he should wake up from his dream, but Lewin told him that it's possible. Henkes was taken aback. Lewin explained that the Grand Festival is an event where collaboration is important, and he advised that it might be better not to embrace elements that interfere with teamwork. Henkes asked if it means Lewin will compete without them. In response to that, Lewin suggested that while they are on the way, Henkes and the others should think over who their representative is right now, and made sure to let them know that there is no Gary Hill in there that will recognize his loyalty. Henkes told Lewin that if Lewin flunked his first individual battle, he wouldn't listen to any commands during the Grand Festival. They rode the mana train. Students were amazed at how fast it was. Meanwhile, Strang was also being loud on commenting how the world had become a good place. A door inside the train opened. A student announced that he smelled the scent of a loser somewhere, and this student mentioned that there are country bumpkins of the Academy. Lewin recognized the pattern on this student's uniform. It signifies Oyota National Magic Institute. Oyota National Magic Institute is the only training school in Oyota, a sand kingdom built on a desert. It is renowned for their ancient history. They were especially known for honing their swordsmanship and bodies to the extreme. Lewin wondered what those students were doing there. Then this student looked for Mikkel Garyhill. He asked if Mikkel ran away due to odds and sods. As an added insult, he expressed that he was about to ask Mikkel to take good care of them this year too, as his servant. Then this student laughed out loud. He told the country bumpkins that they are in charge of coming. Last place this year too. Strang expressed how Lewin is so patient, to the point that he could stay still even after hearing those words. Lewin had no idea because he couldn't get in the position all this time, but it's obvious how their academy is being treated. He glanced at someone. It was Professor Heidel. It's obvious that the professor had no plans on stepping in. It's because the Grand Festival is a competition of students, and the professor is only there as a guide. So Lewin understood that the authority and responsibility for the team falls in his hands as the representative of the academy. The guy approached Henkes and asked for Michael Garyhill. Henkes appeared nervous. Someone spoke, and informed the guy that Michael is probably bedridden, praying for his broken ribs to stick back properly right about now. The guy checked the person who spoke, and he saw one student standing up. Henkes told the guy that it's their academy's representative. The student was doubtful, since it's his first time seeing Lewin. He walked towards Lewin's direction. He introduced himself as Oyota's representative, Seta Malkiri. Then he asked for Lewin's name. Lewin mentioned his name. Lewin told the guy that it was enough greeting, and if he's done picking a fight, he should get out of their compartment now. The guy was stunned. Lewin added that he expected a sincere apology for calling them acadummies. This made Seta Malkiri angry. He was triggered when he was asked to apologize. The guy asked Henkes if he didn't even tell their new rep about him, Seta Malkiri. Henkes was anxious to answer. Seda pushed Henkes to do it properly. He threatened Henkes that he would beat him up so Henkes won't forget. Lewin caught on that. He wondered if that's the reason why the students who attended the Magic Festival tremble at the sight of Oyota. He assumed that they must have been assaulted by Seta Malkiri. Lewin realized that it was all part of the plan to kill the team's spirits before the match. He figured out that the grand festival had already begun. Lewin asked if Seta wanted to go for a round. Seta commented that Lewin must have really lost his mind. Seta told him that he won't cower, and Lewin shouldn't regret it after getting hit. Before Seta could throw a punch, a man commanded him to stop at once. It was their professor. The professor scolded him for the fuss before the match. In a condescending tone, the professor asked him if he really wanted to make enemies from the beginning. The professor turned to Professor Heidel and apologized for their students' rude behavior. Then the professor pushed Seta back into their compartment. Before fully disappearing, Seta warned Lewin that he'll see him later. Lewin watched him leave. Then he uttered that just as he thought, "It's not from the start." Seta asked the professor why he stopped them. When it was the professor who proposed that method, Seta was so confused. The professor sighed and asked if he didn't see it. Seta had no idea what he's talking about. The professor replied he was smiling. Professor Heidel of Ignit Academy was smiling while watching them as if he was looking forward to the fight. Seta suggested that it could be a coincidence. The professor sighed and admitted that he's not sure. But what he had observed is that guy Lewin certainly has something that they don't know about. The professor is certain that he's a different guy from Mikkel Garyhill that fought him last time. That made Seta quiet. After the Oyota students came and left, the atmosphere inside the cabin oddly changed. The students crowd around Lewin. They talked about the first match that will be against a group competition without the representative. So, if Lewin's not joining, they wonder if they can do it among themselves. One student was spirited as he expressed that they should not lose. That immediately vanished the worries of the others. Lewin smiled as he thought that, just up until a while ago, those students who were filled with jealousy and ego started to unite as one. They asked if Lewin's okay. Henkes told him that he was too rash just now. He told him that those guys grew up fighting their entire lives, and if a fight broke out, but they did not expect Lewin to ask if they weren't feeling angry. Lewin told them that those bastards disrespected them, and him, their representative, right on his face. He asked them what if he, the rep, just stayed still. He explained to them that those bastards may get even more excited and could make fun of them even more. The students agreed, but they tried to reason out. Lewin added that if they had stayed still, they would have really become acadummies. He asked the guys if that's what they want. The guys were sullen as Lewin asked them if they would continue being disrespected. With passion, Lewin announced to the guys that it's because they let them beat them up. That's why they have been disrespected for 5 years. That evoked strong emotions from Henkes. Lewin continued to ask about what they planned to do. He expressed that it might not be the right time for them to have internal fights because of ego. A student suggested that he place Henkes as the gatekeeper in the arrowball match. He asked for Lewin's insight. While Henkes blushed at the suggestion, Lewin had observed that Michael's lackeys had decided to join him on the Grand Festival too. He wished for them to maintain that resolve until the test is over. There was an announcement that the next stop was the Altain Duchy. The students were advised to take their bags since they're about to alight the train. Altain Duchy is one of the states belonging to the Rainak Federation and the only state recognized as a neutral state under the Empire. There, even if they are enemies who have been at war for decades, emotions must be excluded. If bloodshed occurs inside Altain, the Rainak Empire, the ruler of the continent, steps forward and judges the crimes. Because of that, large-scale international competitions such as the Magic Festival of the Magic Society and Sword Grand Prix of the Swordsmanship Society are held in Altain. The students were looking around Rainak, an imperial federation under the control of the Empire. Jason asked Lewin if he also sees it as a completely different world. Jason commented that the Damon estate is supposed to be rich in itself, but the estates in Rainak are on a different league. Lewin looked around Altain. He expected it to be that way since it is the capital of the kingdom. To him, it looked antique, and everyone seemed relaxed. and seeing it makes Lewin think that they really came from such a small place. They decided to go to ride the carriage to get into their accommodations. While on the ride, Professor Heidel expressed something out of concern. He told Lewin that they should not go to another college's accommodation, even by mistake, because nothing good will come out of picking a fight. It was funny how Lewin felt a bit guilty when the professor said that while looking at him. Strang got excited upon a sight of something. Lewin asked what it was. Strang pointed outside the window. Strang mentioned that there's an interesting smell. The carriage shook and Strang fell from Lewin's shoulders. Strang mentioned that it seemed like Draca's relic is in the place. The next day, at the Ignit Academy accommodation. Jason was still groggy when he asked Lewin if he's going out on a date since he was in a rush. Lewin had no time to answer since he went straight to the exit. He ran fast while asking Strang if he's sure of it. Strang told him that they will start seeing it on the minimap. Strang explained that even for an avatar of strength like him, it isn't common. They arrived at the Altane's Touching Memories workshop. Lewin entered. Upon entering, he commented that it was something that the Black Dragon had used, so he thought it would be in a unique place, but the place that they had just entered was too normal. Honestly, Lewin thought it would be somewhere like a black market or rich person's vault. Strang explained that Draca's relic is useless for non-strength-based wizards, so it's just trash for an ordinary wizard. Lewin used the player's eye. And then he saw a trail of light. There was a glowing object near a statue. Lewin saw the Ring of Invulnerability. It is a player-exclusive unique artifact. It is the first artifact created by Draca, but also his first failure. Using the power of invulnerability, there is a small chance to resist any physical force that touches that body. It increases the chance to negate physical damage. Knowing that it's a failure, Lewin got suspicious. Strang gave an all-knowing laugh and explained that it's a little unique. Strang informed him that it's not just about resisting the attacks, but it even resists a touch from a friend, even a hug from a lover. Strang commented that it might prove useless when needed, and it could activate on something trivial, making it a failure. But he told Lewin that he needed that. It increases strength by 200 when equipped. Lewin knew that increase alone, it was worth wearing. He put on the ring. He was pleased that it fit perfectly, like the ring was made for him. He told the counter that he would like to buy it. He asked how much it cost. The old man at the counter told him to just take it. It had been sitting there for too long, and he had no idea how to take care of it anyway. In response to that kindness, Lewin decided to buy something else too. He walked around the shop while commenting how convenient it is to have player's eye. Because of it, he can even recognize the worth of the subject. Some things are labeled as normal, average, or low. Then he noticed something. He saw a high-ranking item, and it's a book called Quantum Mechanics of Magic and Swords. Lewin chose that one, but when he was about to pick it up, a girl touched it at the same time as him. He looked at who it was. She is from the Seiki Women's University, and the status window displayed that the girl is Irene Prius, a 5th-class magician and has very high potential. King, also called the King of Wizard and Wizard of Boundary, Tehran Artemis, and she is one of the 11 next-generation magicians that he picked. Lewin had heard that she's a genius who is close to 5th class. Lewin realized that the rumor was actually understated. She told Lewin to let go. Lewin argued that he touched it first. Irene introduced herself, and she figured out from the symbol on Lewin's uniform that he's from Ignit Academy. She told Lewin that he found the thing that he was looking for earlier, but now he's looking for something else to buy, while she, on the other hand, is only there for the book. She asked if he could just let her have it. Lewin figured out that she was listening earlier. Lewin asked why she needed it since people don't normally look for that book. She had difficulty answering him. She blushed as she explained that it was for her personal assignment and she couldn't give the details. Lewin knew that it can't be an assignment from the academy. He thought that it could be from the king or something. He lets her have it. Irene did not expect that. Lewin replied that she just mentioned that it's important for her, so she can have it. Irene thanked him. Lewin looked around on what to buy. Irene observed him for a while. Later that day, Jason was screaming when he found out that Lewin met Irene Prius. He inquired what they had talked about, and if she's a beauty just as the rumors say. It was not only Jason, but also Henkies, who asked for more details while having those sparkly eyes. Jason expressed how jealous